Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about the top 5 baits that you need to be throwing during the post spawn. We're going to talk about it more of a progression of fish just finished spawning all the way to almost like the early summertime period. My bait choice kind of changes throughout that time of year. However, these 5 baits are going to cover you through the entire post spawn, and I never leave the house without them or them tied on. So let's go into it a little bit. I'm not going to talk too much about like brands or you need to be throwing this bait. If you want to see what kind of baits I'm using, I'll link it down below. You can check out all the links in the description on what baits I'm going to mention in this video. I'm going to talk more about the types of baits that you want to be using and how you want to progress through them to help you catch more fish in the post spawn. So before we get into it, if you're new on my channel, hit the subscribe button down below. I put out new fishing videos every Monday and Thursday, from how-to and tip videos just like this to tournament fishing footage and other fishing footage while I'm out there on the lake. So let's start off with bait number 1, the category Topwater. Topwater is probably one of the best baits that you can throw in the post spawn, especially as soon as they're finished spawning, all the way into that early summer. It's just a fun way to catch them, and in the post spawn it catches a ton of fish. You just have to know the right topwater that you need to be throwing out there based on the conditions. I have a progression of 3 baits that I go throughout the post spawn. Number 1 that I'm going to start with is a popper. So pick your favorite popper, whichever one you like. The reason I pick this is because there will still be, first off, there'll still be fry garters up there, and there'll still be bedding bass. There'll be a mix of the two. When you pop this through a ball of fry, it will trigger a reaction out of a bass every single time. So the popper will get you a bunch of bites. That first initial wave of post spawners that come out, you'll still catch bedding bass on this if you pop it over their bed. You'll still catch fry garters, and it works really, really slowly. So the first thing they want to do after they're done spawning is get a meal, but they don't want to move very fast for it or anything like that. They're not going to track down a buzzbait or a whopper plopper. They're going to want something that moves slow. So that's why I picked the popper. As we get further into the post spawn, that's when I'm going to go to a walk the dog type bait, a spook, a sexy dog, whatever type you like. The reason I go to this is because as soon as the bass are done spawning, the shads start to spawn. So early in the morning is when I'm really going to throw this one. Up around any type of rock that's shallow, you'll see those shad that are spawning up there, and you can cover a ton of water with this thing very quickly. A lot of times these bass are already recuperated by then and they're ready to chase bait, so you can start getting on them with this big topwater or even a smaller one. You can just cover a lot of water with this and it'll get you a lot of bites when those shad are spawning right after the bass are done. And then finally, the next one I'm going to go to is a frog. That's going to be the last one on the list, and the reason for this is after the shad are done spawning, the bluegill will start spawning. And a frog can imitate a frog, but it also imitates bluegill really, really well. So this is going to be my best bait for fishing around the bluegill spawn as well. But after the shad are done spawning and the bluegill start spawning, these 2 baits, they'll still work, but this will start to work better because you'll be imitating those bluegills really well. They'll be up there in the lily pads spawning on the root stems. They'll be up in grass mats spawning around in there. Anywhere there's some hard cover, they can dig out some beds, stuff like that. You cover a lot of water with the frog, put it into a lot of places that these 2 baits won't go, and you'll catch a lot of bass that are looking to feed on bluegills when you go to this one here. The number 2 bait up on the list, again, is not only going to be a good post-spawn bait, but it's going to be a good bait for fishing around the shad spawn, and that's going to be a spinnerbait. It works really well early in the morning when those shad get up there and spawn up on the rock banks, wood cover, anything like that. If you're throwing this around, you feel fish bumping into the blades on your spinnerbait, you're reeling it through areas where you see them spawning up on the bank, you'll be catching a ton of fish if you're throwing this spinnerbait around there. So I will always have a spinnerbait tied on when the shad are up there spawning. It's immediately after the bass are done spawning, so it's post-spawn, meets almost perfectly all the time. And anytime you get some low light conditions, and if you get a cloudy day or a windy day where the sun doesn't come out as much, the shad can spawn all day long, or they'll stay shallow all day long, and you can have a heck of a day on a spinnerbait. Always got to have a spinnerbait tied on in the post spawn. It's not going to work well on those sunny, slick, calm days when they're just done spawning and the shad haven't started yet, because like I said, they're going to be looking for an easy meal and they're not going to want to run this down. But if the shad are spawning, this is the bait you need to have tied on in the post spawn. And the third bait and the last hard bait on this list is going to be a deep diving crankbait. You're going to have to throw a deep diving crankbait this time of year, especially on some of these southeastern lakes. I don't fish them as much because I live up in Pennsylvania, but it does happen up here as well. What will happen is these fish will get done spawning and they'll go live offshore for the summertime, and that's when you can cover a ton of water and find them with these crankbaits. The best reason that I throw the big crankbaits first and not like a football jig or a worm or something like that, these fish have no pressure out on the deep spots yet because they're just getting out there. So once they get out there for the first time, they're going to be very easy to catch on these deep diving crankbaits. So get your fun in on these while you can, and then as you get into July, August, even September, if you're still throwing this, it's going to be a lot tougher to get bites, but you might catch them on something better. So I'm going to go to the deep diving crankbait first because I can cover more water, find where these fish want to live in the summertime, because if you're finding them offshore with this bait, you might only catch 2 or 3 this weekend, but you could go back to that same spot next weekend and there could be 20 or 30 there. So they're going to be coming to you if you're catching them on this deep diving crankbait in the post spawn. It allows you to cover more water, find more spots, and you fish for some more unpressured fish while everybody else is up there still fishing shallow. Just make sure your crankbait goes 1 foot to 2 deeper than the depth of water you're fishing and you'll be good to go. Now we're going to get into number 4 on the list. These next 2 are going to be for those days that it's really tough fishing, hard to get a bite. So these next 2 baits are going to combat that calm sunny days when it's really hard to get a bite on those other baits that I mentioned. First one being the Senko. You cannot fish the post spawn without a Senko. Catches fish all year round, but especially during the post spawn. Number 1 way, probably a wacky rig up around some docks or some shallow cover where these fish are just going to go sit and suspend after they're done spawning, and they'll wait for an easy meal to come by, like the Senko, skip it under a dock and catch them that way. Couple other ways you can rig it, pretty much however you like. Texas rig will catch them weightless, or weighted. If you're fishing like a big submerged grass flat, you can put it on a weight, throw it out there, catch them that way. You can put it on a heavier weight and you can flip some mats or something like that, or like light cover around brush, stuff like that. Pretty much any way you can imagine to rig a Senko this time of year, it'll work. Just make sure you have a Senko tied on in some form or fashion. So let's get into the last bait. This one going to be a bonus bait because it'll cover not only shallow water, but also those deep water fish if they're not going to eat that crankbait. And the final bait that you have to have fishing during the post spawn, it's been working for me all spring if you've been watching my channel. I catch tons of fish on this bait, and that is going to be the Dropshot. I don't have it actually tied up here. I will do a video eventually on how to tie this up and some other fishing tricks about the Dropshot. But the Dropshot is going to be one that you need to have. And the reason this is going to work in both shallow and deep water is you can vary your weight size. So if you're fishing a pond, you can put an 1/8 ounce weight on here. If it has that black mossy grass that grows on the bottom, you can fish it really slow and keep a worm over the top of it, and the weight will be what's getting stuck in the grass, and you'll still catch fish on the Dropshot with an open hook over top of that black mossy grass that's in there. Or you can go to a bigger weight. If you're fishing for smallmouth, you can fish offshore with this. Great bait for smallmouth in the post spawn, even for spotted bass in the post spawn. If you're fishing for largemouth and you're throwing that crankbait, Tennessee river ledges, southeastern lakes, stuff like that, they get off in points, stuff like that. You could throw a bigger weight, get your Dropshot worm down there really deep, 20, 25 feet, and fish it really slowly on the bottom. And if they're not going to eat that crankbait, or if those fish have been getting some pressure, even because let's face it, a lot of these guys know that these fish get offshore now and they start hammering them with deep crankbaits as soon as they get out there. If you go out to some of these spots where guys are catching them on a crankbait, you throw a Dropshot, you're going to get some bites on it. It works amazing in the post spawn. It fits right into that easy meal. Fish it really slow. You can fish this in water from 2 foot to 30, 40, even 50 foot. You fish this as deep as you want. That's just why it's an excellent post spawn bait, and you need to have the Dropshot tied on anytime you're fishing in the post spawn. I hope you enjoyed today's video talking all about the baits that you need to have this post spawn. I hope these tips help you out in catching some more fish once those bass get off the beds and fishing gets a little tough there for a period of time before it starts picking up again back into the early summer. I'm sure some of these baits will get you some bites no matter how tough the fishing is. If you enjoyed today's video, leave a like down below and bear with me a little bit on the content here. I blew my lower unit up on my boat, so I'm a little trying to figure out what I need to be fishing this time of year. I had a plan on what I was going to make for content for the next coming weeks, and I did not plan for my lower unit to break up in the process. So we're going to get creative with some content, like we're doing these top 5 bait videos right now, and we're going to wait for get our boat back, and then we'll be back out there doing some fishing videos again. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave that like down below and hit subscribe so you don't miss any more of the fishing videos coming up. Thanks for watching.